Everyone, especially those of you who are just joining us. Welcome to today's webinar, and thank you for standing by. Today we're here for the Channel Focus Community Webinar, 6 Insights on How to Use Smart Data to Grow Your Channel. All phone lines are currently in a listen-only mode, and later there will be a question and answer session with instructions being given at that time. You may also ask a question at any time using the chat window located in the control panel. Chat questions will be answered at the end of the presentation with the rest of the Q&A portion. Today's session is being recorded, and you'll be provided a copy of today's materials following the call. Now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. As Channel Insights Director of Sales for EMEA, Owen McKee is responsible for operations in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and managing a number of key global relationships. Based in the UK, Owen has extensive sales and operational experience successfully managing multiple global territories and large high-tech enterprise accounts for well-known global electronics firms. Prior to joining Channel Insight, Owen was the Director of Client Development in EMEA for an industry competitor where he negotiated and won the largest client deal in the company's history. Prior to that, he was the Country Manager for Emerson, where he closed and managed the company's largest government solutions sale in EMEA. And Owen also held several senior-level sales positions for Scantech UK Limited, Seiko UK Limited, and Grundig. Our other speaker, Rod Bafty, has been involved with high-tech since 1984. Formerly managing director at WBN, a leading high-tech agency, Rod spent the 1980s responsible for the successful launch of over 20 major technology companies into the European market. In 1993, he launched Bafty & Company, which quickly grew to become the largest company in the world, owning and organizing conferences addressing key sales and marketing issues for senior executives in the technology and telecom industries. In a radical departure in 2005, Bafty & Company launched their first B2B community. Since this time, the community business has grown rapidly, and the company is now a world leader in this area and is recognized as one of the leading thinkers on building, running, and managing business-to-business communities. Owen, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Thanks very much, Sam. I appreciate your introduction there. Welcome to all to the webinar today. We're going to spend 45 minutes just reviewing a recent survey that we carried out where we reached out to 85 high-tech vendors just to understand some of the challenges that they were facing in and around channel data management and how that situation is changing going forward. Some of the key objectives that they see as problems, and also identifying the things that are working very well for them. Rod and I are going to exchange our views on that based on some of the statistics that have come back to us, some of which we absolutely felt were in line with industry standards, some of which actually quite surprised us. So at the end, we will have a question and answer session, so we'd appreciate your input to that and understand where you as an organization are benchmarking against some of these statistics and whether they're facts that you recognize. So let's just move further into the process. What we're actually doing today is we're just going to show you the 6 samples that we identified as being the critical metrics that came back to us. What we will do, I think as Sam touched on in the introduction, is to circulate the complete survey as well as the recording of this event and the PowerPoint itself. So as you can see here, there's quite a cross-section of information that we want to look at. But I think what struck us overall is the need for improved communications between vendors and their channel partners and streamlining some of those operations. So we're going to touch on visibility into the marketplace itself, but also start to drill into some of the challenges around fiscal probity and fiscal efficiency, because those are the areas that actually fundamentally make a difference to you as a business, and more importantly, to your partners as they look to grow loyalty and ultimately revenues and margins for you as a preferred vendor for them. So let's just move our way into the survey itself. So the first question that we asked was, how do they rate the importance of utilization of data? Well, clearly you can see here that a standout statistic is the just reporting of channel data itself, just to get visibility. Something like 71% indicated to us that this was core to the fabric of operational efficiency within their business. And as such, that's not really a surprise for us, because that is the platform which will drive all of your downstream operations and hopefully help you to fine-tune some of the opportunities for increased margins, increased stock turns, etc. But I wanted to focus really on a couple of the other statistics that sat with us, and that is that you're looking at 72% are using this information for the calculation of their channel ROI. So the days where data really has just been used for performance metrics of sales really are starting to change. You're starting to see that data is being utilized across the board. And the goal for automation of channel data management systems is to ensure that all of the key stakeholders across the business are starting to see a consistency of data. So at 72%, that's significant because you're starting to see utilization by your finance department, you're starting to see harmonization within your marketing department, and the need to establish success of whether programs are or are not working, and more importantly there, how this harmonized team can react to that. So the unification of the sales manager, the marketing manager, the finance director, making sure they are in the right place at the right time and optimizing the use of all of the resources and all of the knowledge that is available to them through the utilization of data. Another key statistic is this immediate drive, and we've seen a significant trend over the last 14, 15 months where people are wanting to ensure that they're able to consolidate their data into their internal CRM systems, but more importantly, they want to make that data available through PRM systems to their partners so they can start to measure the metrics internally, but also give visibility to how the partner is performing, what market share they're addressing, are they on target to hit all of the rebates and incentive programs that they've put together. These are all key areas of communication which we think will continue to grow, and we'll touch on that a little bit further into the program itself. I think for me, the surprising, and you can see that I've actually highlighted this with a little red block there, is that 45% of the respondents did not regard the determination of partner inventory and the levels of stock that is being held as being important to them. That I find unusual because I think if you were to take that survey and adopt that across 85 key distributors, I think you'd get a different representative view of that, because for them, their ideal goal is to drive inventory to a minimum and push pressure back onto the vendor itself. So again, you're involving the supply chain as well as all of these other key market sectors.
And I think, Owen, that slide reflects what we're hearing in the channel generally, which is there's more and more pressure on senior channel people to justify the channel, to justify ROI, and we're seeing a tremendous drive for how do we get these analytics, how do we convince the CFO that the channel is valuable, it is producing a great return on investment for us. And so the Calculated Channel Program ROI doesn't surprise me at all, but I think there's a lot of work that a lot of companies still need to do there, and I think it's going to be a bigger and bigger question as we move forward. It's also going to become a big question in, related to the cloud. For a SaaS vendor, what is the value of the channel? Do I use the channel? Do I go direct? Do I do both? How do I do it? And so I think data and the CFO questioning more and more is a huge issue, and it's going to be a huge issue for all channel execs as we move forward.
Yeah, Rob. I think those are absolutely valid points. I think one thing that we are seeing the emergence of is value-added distribution, and I think that the partner channel gearing up to having a greater and a broader reach in terms of their skill sets and how they will support vendors, I think is seriously going to influence that as a process going forward, because it's not a situation where as the cloud is being adopted and as it expands as a go-to-market process from a software perspective, I think there is a need to have this attached POS that goes with that. So whether that's extended services or whether that's deployment that's coming from value-added distribution, I think we're seeing a change in the market sector generally. So we moved on really then to a situation where we wanted to understand what the top 3 challenges were from the market perception and how they interpreted where they could glean value and improvement in their systems that would help ultimately drive the goal for all vendors, which is to ensure optimization of margin, availability, profitability, and most importantly, I think, is a loyal partner base. And a key area within this is this adoption of automation. And what struck us throughout the survey is that there is a need not only just to collect the data, because where we're looking here at getting partners to submit POS data, it's still perceived as a challenge. But I think the market realization is that that has to change. And this comes back to the two-way communication of the information being provided to the vendor, the cleansing and analytics of that data actually helps your partner base to improve their efficiencies. So they are stocking the right product. They are selling at an optimum price. They don't see price erosion. They're able to look at and provide information about total addressable market. All of this can only really come out of getting this core fabric in place, which is receiving the data from your partners. So we've seen a significant change in the attitude of partners, because conventionally the attitude was, what's in it for me? And that generally has led to some form of incentive or additional discount rebate system that is attached to the supply of the data. As we grow more and more into a big data environment, we are seeing this need for smart data rather than big data. So people being able to understand the key action points that will make a difference to their business. So it's not just the receipt of the POS. And again, I would stress the inventory aspect here, because slow-moving product has a direct impact on that partner's ability to operationally maintain their fiscal performance, and more importantly, reinvest in more stock for you as key vendors. Of course, the way that they're able to then do that is by starting to get comprehensive analytics. And we're seeing that with the advent of dashboards and major CRM and PRM providers, this thirst for data and simplification of the data and improving of communications is really starting to have a positive impact on the partner community. Sorry, Rob, did you have a question there?
Yeah, I was just going to comment. I think if you ran this survey 3 or 4 years ago, getting partners to submit POS data, analyzing channel data, using dashboards. Bear in mind, these are the challenges that we're focusing on this chart. Those numbers would have been way higher than they are today. So I think there's clearly been an awful lot of effort put in over the last 3 or 4 years. And as you say, I think there's a recognition from the partners of the need to provide data. So I think it's easier and easier to get partners to provide the data that you're looking for. And I think the cloud has a bearing on that as well, because so much now is direct billing to the customer. So many recurring revenue models involve the partner in simply taking a commission check rather than rebilling. And so I think there's a greater degree of trust. It's not perfect by any means between the channel and the vendor. And I think that's allowing a lot of these changes to happen, which I think is very, very good for the industry. It's also very good for anyone involved in channel management, in that you're able to do a much better job than you could 4 or 5 years ago. It's partly data, it's partly trust, it's partly the technology that allows you to do this, enabling you to get a much, much better understanding of what's going out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, and I think that there is a key statement that's highlighted there, is that cleansing the submitted channel data for the end customer name. Conventionally, this would have been a taboo subject for someone in the distribution or the partner environment to supply you that level of information. from a protectionist perspective, Rod. So I think you're making a really valid point there. But again, that is changing because they're seen as being in true partnership, which is aiding them optimizing what they can sell to that end consumer. It's also enabling them to segment the sectors that they are capable of selling into. So we're seeing an emergence of people starting to use SIC codes so that they get classification of which verticals they're able to sell certain products into. And it also helps them there where they understand which products they can stock, which there are an opportunity for them to sell, and which quite simply are outside of their sphere of excellence. All of this is around optimization of performance of the partner and helping the business to streamline that process as well. And I would stress this, that it's the right product in the right place and at the right time that is enabling this drive for increased margins. And clearly there is pressure on margins because double-digit margins in most arenas have frankly disappeared. And so I think anything that's adding these single-point increments to this is of benefit to all concerned. So just moving on to this principle of how do I get this utopia of all of this information, what is the structure, what is the fabric that is available to me in order to do that. And for a long time there have been major discussions about, do I buy systems or do I build? And I think for the first time we're moving towards a buy rather than build. And I suspect that is because of the complexity of not just the design, the speed at which the market is moving, but also the maintenance from an internal process. So your valuable IT resource shouldn't be tied up with having to get this granular analytics, because it's still challenging in terms of once you receive those files, how do I build the BI platform? What information can I glean? What are my consumers asking for me internally for them to be able to provide that information? So there's still a balance. I think personally the most startling statistic that came out of this is the final point there, where we don't cleanse channel data, we just take what we get. I was shocked by this as a proportion, given the value that can be delivered by collecting data, and whether you're using an internal system, an external system, or a combination of those two, to actually just accept your partner's information without being able to offer any guidance, advice, or improvements of how you can build a stronger working relationship, was surprising, interesting, and I suspect challenging for most vendors. This really now is where we move into what I think is going to be the largest single growth area in terms of deployment of data, because collecting information is all well and good, but how do I communicate that out to my internal consumer data users, but also how do I make that information available to my partners? And so I think this is probably a bigger swing as we've seen in this market sector. Now this could well be because of the emergence of significant players in the market sector, the likes of Salesforce.com and their competitors. I'm reliably told there are other vendors that operate in that space as well. It just seems that Salesforce.com has an excellent marketing machine, so you wouldn't believe that that's necessarily true. But I think their adoption and availability of information and the willingness to be flexible enough to create information going back out to the channel, I think is staggering in terms of its opportunity, and one that I think will change the way that channel expect data to be communicated to them, not just the one-way street that this has conventionally been. Rod, is that something that you're seeing from a communications perspective across the market?
I think more and more companies are integrating everything that they possibly can. Everything is becoming much more transparent. I think partners are expecting that. They want to know what's happening. So they don't want a CRM system where it's just your own salespeople looking at it. They want to be able to look at it. They want valuable information that's going to help them move forward. I think this even boils down beyond the channel to the customer and the customer wanting information. So I think what we're seeing is an incredible integration of all of the different data collection points, and then in the best cases, a seamless transparency of that information to all, not all the information to everyone, but that information out to all the different constituents. I think also within this, one of the things the partners are looking for is more and more help in terms of data from the vendors. So I think this, having lots and lots of siloed data pockets, that's the past. What we need to move forward to is all of the data being pulled into not necessarily a central repository, but all being pulled together so it's available, and everything that could be useful to all the different constituents being there and being accessible. Apart from anything else, from a partner's point of view, if you can do that, you suddenly make their life staggeringly easier. You become the guys that are, the company that is easy to do business with. And if there's one thing we see more than anything else from the partner community, it's this desire to deal with vendors who are easy to do business with, who understand the makeup of the partner and what they do. So I think this is exactly as you say, Owen, this is a huge challenge moving forward. The people that are leaders in the space are really seeing tremendous results from being far more transparent in the marketplace, much more integration, both with customers and with partners, a greater understanding of what the partners are looking for and where they are. As you say, I think this is one of the very, very important areas moving forward, and the vendors that get this right are going to be the ones that really win out at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think just having online access to their weekly performance, where they stand in terms of incentive schemes, their rebates, the whole automation and visibility of this, Rod, I think is market changing and will continue to evolve. And again, we're seeing all of the major players see this as a priority. The discussions that we're having at senior levels across a whole host of different businesses, it's all around how do they get this onto their roadmap, how quickly can they get this onto the roadmap, and it's becoming a #1 priority for the emerging roles of channel data officers, which again, we're starting to see that as being a key role within the business, this balance and knowledge of how do I optimize all of my downstream processes based around the core information of taking information from partners, giving them all of the tools that they need to drive their business forward, and us optimizing the resource. I mean, just in terms of linking up the seamless process of deal registration through to completion of the deal enables forecasting internally to very much be simplified, but it drives accuracy. And I think it's the accuracy and the quality that is the metric that is going to change this and almost be transformational within the market sector. So having discussed that and how you're looking at this optimal utilization of data, the next question that we were asking was really about what do partners expect from vendors themselves, and we can all agree SLAs, we can understand what the market best practices are, but what is the reality out in the market sector today? And so the respondents came back to us, and we were talking very much about what it is that they do, and we wanted some core facts here. So at first glance, 1 week or less for payment of incentive rebates, it's probably around about average. I don't think that there's been a significant change in that market sector for some considerable time. Between 1 and 2 weeks, I think that has improved, and again, we're driving this concept of automation that's influencing that as a process. But when you start to look at over the longer period of time of between 2 weeks and over a month, you're looking at almost 60% of all rebates currently being processed in those timelines. And what is concerning, I think, for the partner community over this is that the days when rebates coming into the market were seen as just being a nice to have and that would pass straight to your bottom line and it adds to your margin, have passed. As margins have significantly reduced, it's a much more competitive market sector we're going. What we're seeing is that incentive rebates really form a fundamental part of operating capital. So this is really starting to stretch financial resources of partners. And I think Rod made a very interesting point there about, are you as an organization easy to do business with? Because setting up the best programs, the best rebates, incentives, whether they're goal attainment or they're specific SKU-related promos, in principle, those are all good news for the partner because it's going to help them to drive margin and improve sales for you and hopefully inventory turn as well. But if the end result of that is that they're not paid in a timely manner, then clearly that puts financial pressure onto the partner base. And I had someone say to me recently, the challenge we have with some of our larger vendors is that they regard us as a bank. When I sign up to an incentive scheme, I need to be paid on time. I need for them to deliver against their commitments. And I think so this is a growing area of concern and a need for improved efficiencies.
And I think the thing that people don't understand is, if you just go back to that slide for a moment, Owen,
yeah.
One of the issues you've got as a partner is you're a small business. If you're a major vendor, you're probably getting credit terms from your suppliers. So you look at this and go, okay, 1 week or less. Well, actually, I'm paying my supplier in a month. That's brilliant. But actually, in the vast majority of cases, and I was talking to a couple of partners the other day, they're having to pay up front. So even a week means by the time they've submitted it, got it all together, got the paperwork, you're probably talking 2 to 3 weeks from the time when they actually had to pay the bill. So you're still asking them to fund the process. Now, I understand that they've got to submit and you've got to have the paperwork together, but if you then go out to over a month, you're actually probably not asking them to fund whatever activity it was for a month. You're probably asking them to fund it for close to 2 months. And one of the disturbing trends we're hearing about at the moment is the percentage of co-op and MDF monies that are actually being left on the table. And I think that, I haven't got anything empirical to prove this, but I bet that this and these stats have something to do with that, where partners are going, I just can't afford to fund it for 2 months. It takes too much out of my cash flow, and so even although it might hurt me from a marketing point of view, cash is king, and vendor X is not going to pay me on time, and therefore I'm just not going to do it. And so I think there's a real lesson here for the vendors that timely payment is incredibly important, and don't view the partner organization as having the same kind of financial resources, the same kind of credit, etc. that you do. Apart from the larger partners, they really don't. And so I think this is an incredibly important area for vendors to look at and to improve on.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, Rod, what that does do is gives us a very nice segue into the next statistic that came back to us, is already you're challenged with this principle of how quickly you can pay those partners, and you're right, it's putting increased financial pressure on the partner base themselves. But there is still, within the industry, there is accepted that there are significant levels of error within this whole area. So not only is the process late, but when it's actually concluded, there's still regarded as a high level of discrepancy here. So I think this opportunity to actually be dealing with this process in an online, highly automated, no-touch scenario should actually take away a lot of the challenges that sit here. Because what that means is you can identify any issues in terms of potential wrong claims. You identify them at the point of receipt of the data, as opposed to a downstream end of quarter process. But if you just take a look at from between 5% and over 50%, this is a staggering amount of error that goes in what is probably one of the largest expenditures outside of inventory itself for a vendor, supporting the channel, getting your MDF right, getting your rebates in on time, and making them accurate. And again, we still come back to this circular point of, are you easy to do business with? So as a vendor, if you are fitting into each of these categories, you're not providing quality information back to the partner itself. You're not able to help them shape their business. You're not providing accurate incentives. And ultimately, you're not paying those rebates on time. All of these would lend you towards becoming a non-preferred supplier. And certainly this is becoming a competitive arena because other vendors are actually adopting this and understanding the need for this as a clean process so that everyone fully understands what they're signing up to in terms of a deliverable. And SLAs are not just set as part of a contract agreement that's there. SLAs are actually targeted and met.
And I think the other issue here, Owen, is
Sorry, let me just...
the whole issue of, one, okay, say a partner's claiming $5,000 and you pay them $4,800. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's another illustration of the fact that in the partner's eyes, you don't care enough to have done the job properly. The other issue you've got here is, and I know all partners are incredibly honest people, but if you overpay me by that $200, I'm not so sure that 100% of our partners are going to tell us. If you
I've never heard of a partner reject an overpayment. I have heard of a number that have complained, like Billio, when it's been underpaid.
Exactly. So I suspect that this is something that's actually costing the industry an enormous amount of money. And I did actually hear, and I can't say which vendor, but they put in a new system which dramatically reduced their error rate. And in the first quarter, they saved over $4 million. And the partners weren't unhappy about that because the partners were also getting exactly what they were supposed to be getting. And previously, there'd been a level of overpayment and miscalculation, which had been quite extraordinary. So that you've got, hang on, how much do you value the partner? You're going to pay them correctly, keep them happy. Are you overpaying them? If you're underpaying them, I bet they're going to make a noise. And so this is not just a bone of contention. It's also a real financial problem for a lot of vendors out there in the marketplace, and it's something that is not that difficult to tidy up.
I agree with that, Rod. And I think one thing that shouldn't be lost on that is just how resource sapping this is for the vendors themselves, in that they're having to build support networks to correct things that could be identified at source. So you're building these downstream processes and building up these teams in order to execute the identification and qualification and rectification of errors that could be addressed at source. And it just leads to a level of frustration and aggravation that exists within the channel that frankly can be addressed. It does not need to be operational in that way. So changing times, I think, and I think there is a recognition that these are the areas, and we were pleasantly surprised that we can see and identify clearly these metrics and what the channel are looking to try and do, and how there is this harmonization between the vendors and understanding how the channel needs to operate and how they can support that whole process. So that kind of leads us nicely into a slide here about the consistent themes that came back to us. Getting your core understanding of exactly what is going on in your marketplace. If you understand what your total addressable market is, who are the right partners for you to perform with? This can only come out of analytics. That is what is going to drive those metrics. Do you have the right partners in the right place? Are they performing at the right level? All of this can be a data-driven exercise. So if you're working in harmony with your key Tier 1 distribution partners, and you're extending that through to Tier 2, and even then through into the end user, use that information. And that is how you're going to simplify some of these growing internal processes that are having to put things right. This drive to get things right first time speeds up operational efficiency throughout the business. Clearly that data needs to be accurate. So the receipt of data, the receipt of a file into the vendor itself is all well and good. But if that's not received in a timely and accurate fashion, then actually it's of little value to you. So the measurability of that information, the ability to react to it, the ability to communicate that information back to all of the key consumers is critical in terms of a go-forward process. And what I've just put together here is just how many people are involved in the whole supply process. So I touched on this earlier where we were mentioning that the days where it's just the salesman that needs to know what's going on in the market so that he can claim his commission have changed. Supply chain are more demanding. Lean manufacturing means that they don't have the luxury of being able to stockpile product into distribution. There is a pushback from distribution on this as a process. So each of these four segments here, finance, they're critical in terms of knowing exactly what's going on in the information channel. Sales, of course. How are the partners performing? Can I change that? Is there something that happened last week in my channel that I need to address that will improve that process? Have I seen a sudden spike where I'm going to have a shortfall of product? Who do I need to communicate that to? Well, clearly that's got to go through to supply chain, and it's got to go up the inventory process. So if you've seen a spike in Tier 2, that needs to be fed back into Tier 1. Marketing, of course, these are the people that are designing the programs, and they're measuring success of that. Is that program working? Can I change it? If you're doing this in a dynamic fashion, all of this becomes attainable. So very much the process is, and whether this is an internally led process or it's a combination of internal, external, or a totally outsourced process, automation is the key. And I think as more people in the partner community are investing in IT and their own infrastructures and their ability to supply and absolve themselves from this weekly need of creating files, enables them to absorb the information and run a much more efficient business for themselves. So that's kind of the key points. Sam, I think we probably, what I'd like to do, conscious of time here, maybe we should open it up to the floor in terms of if there's any questions. I do actually have some key takeaways as a summary here, but maybe we should open that up and ask questions from the floor.
Sure, we can do that, Owen. Excuse me. So we're going to open up for questions like Owen just said. If you'd like to ask a question, you can do so in a couple of ways. One way is to raise your hand using the Raise Hand button located in the GoToWebinar control panel. If at any time your question has been answered, please lower your hand and remove yourself from the question queue. And also, if you prefer to ask a question via chat, you can do that using the chat window located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. So we'll see if any questions come through here for a second.
This is the piece that all presenters dread because someone's going to ask a really technical, complex question that we don't have an immediate answer to, Sam. But fire away.
Mitigated risk, right?
Yeah, it's all risk and reward. That's what it's all about.
Okay, here's a question. It seems like this is really about being a data-driven company. Can you explain what you mean by that and how the channel information is delivered about my company's channel, how often, and in what formats?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that's true of the industry sector as a whole, that organizations do need to become more data-driven. So not only their internal processes, and I think there's a real dichotomy here in that if I look at major organizations today where they have a direct and an indirect model, the level of information that they have with regards to their direct channel is probably a good 2 or 3 iterations ahead of their indirect. And I think they need to bring these two factors into line. But becoming a data-driven organization is the only way, I think, that you are able to go into to drive key business improvements and to implement KPIs and set those KPIs for your partners, for your internal salespeople. Data-driven will be the future, and we're seeing, big data is an overused phrase currently. I frankly would still like to refer to that as smart data. So becoming data-driven, but really using the data in a smart fashion so it makes demonstrable improvements. Does that address the question?
I think so, yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Another one, I would like to be able to get more high-level information from my data. Would I be able to derive total available market, average selling price, price erosion, and margin integrity from my data? And is it possible to get this information for the markets my products are in?
I suppose my initial response to that, and it's a really interesting question, is that I believe today that varies by market, as in there are still certain regions whereby either through compliance or a lack of willingness to supply this information, there are challenges in terms of getting that comprehensive information. This comes back to the core process of if you're working with the right partners and you demonstrate the value to them of providing you this information, that it's of mutual benefit to you and them as a key partner within you, then certainly you can address the total addressable market. And what we're actually seeing is that this is a growing demand. And again, because of regulation, you may see statistical data that appears in the market of market share, but it's the timeliness of that information and how that's communicated. I think there's more and more pressure, and we see this in general life with the Internet of Things. Speed and availability of information is critical in the decision-making process. So you can address this. I think it's working with the partner to get them to appreciate the value of that and take that forward as a clear understanding and a roadmap of how you want to achieve it. Is all the information available today? It is. Do all partners supply that today? They probably don't, but they actually should be encouraged to do so.
Excellent. Another question we had just popped through. What have you found as best tools to transfer data between the vendor and partner?
Yeah, again, I mean, very interesting question, because there is a huge amount of debate over this in the channel data space. I think there's a little bit of a misnomer in terms of people believe that EDI is the most efficient way of getting data. From a processing perspective, if you have EDI or you have a direct link into the partner's either accounting system or their ERP system, of course that makes that very efficient. But the quality of that information is only as good as the way that that information has been set up in their system. I think today, still too small a percentage of communication is undertaken in spreadsheets and emails. But of course, from an industry perspective, from a best practice perspective, we want to see, and we are seeing, the emergence of online auto-load solutions whereby it's not a bind for the partner. The partner doesn't see this as a process. It's a script, it's a job, it's run automatically, and they automatically receive that information coming back to them. And I think that this emphasis on communication protocols is something that needs to be paid attention to, and again is key to making sure that the process is seamless. You want to be in a situation where you have machine talking to machine. The moment that you introduce the human aspect from a partner and a key individual within that partner's arena needing to send you that information, that's fraught with risk, because human beings have holidays, human beings have sickness, and they also sometimes have memory lapses. I think if you can establish an automated process, that will keep that transformation and that transaction process smooth, consistent, and hopefully then you can start to address the core element of accuracy of the data rather than worrying about just receiving it.
Excellent. Another question here. I hear it's really difficult to collect channel data from partners in China. How do you get past this hurdle?
Yeah, yes, and it's strange to us as an organization, and this is clearly not a sales pitch, but it's strange to us as an organization that this still continues to be regarded as an issue. I think as we have seen the growth of those emerging regions, and the same can be said of the Latin America region, which conventionally had been challenging for the collection of data. We're still using these same core principles of there is value in the provision of this information. And we're just undertaking a piece of work which is all about total addressable market, where we're reaching out not only to the to the vendor that has engaged us, but to all of their competitors, partners as well. So I believe that that's something in the past. Is it 100% resilient at this stage? It's not, but we've made serious advances in terms of selling the concept of the value of data to all of these parties. So I think that's changing.
Great. Along the same line, someone's wondering, is it difficult to get information from channel partners in Latin America?
Again, I think I just mentioned there, they're probably in line with the this understanding of the emerging markets within the Asia-Pacific region, China specifically. But again, this is it's a universal solution, and I think the need for driving business, the need for driving margin, is changing that thought process. There is Sam, it is true to say that I think anyone operating or selling services in and around CDM today, the greatest single contribution they can make is education of the channel. And that forms a very large part of what we as a business are doing going to the market, because there is a lack of understanding, there's a lack of definition. But I would put the two market sectors on a par.
Sure. Okay, great. Well, that looks like all the questions we've had for now. So do you want to go ahead and go through your key takeaways and summary here, Owen?
I can. I'm cognizant of time, and it's a Thursday, so those people that are dialing in from Europe will be looking forward to a very happy long Easter weekend. So, yeah, clearly each of the points that we've touched on going through the presentation, it's all about once you establish the basic fabric of communication, and I would emphasize there, it is two-way communication with the partners. All of these goals, all of these areas of angst can be addressed. They can drive efficiencies in terms of the inaccuracy and timeliness of payments of rebates. Automation will change the face of the way that channel interacts with partners. Again, I'm pretty excited about this whole integration of the CRM and PRM. And I mentioned that particular slide, but I think this is probably the biggest single growth area and will implement the biggest single change in terms of communications that the industry has seen for some considerable time. Ultimately, I think what it comes down to, Sam, is a need for a highly automated, no-touch environment where you just become an easier vendor to work with, and therefore the partner can concentrate on what they do best, and that is selling your product, taking your product to market, and making the optimum levels of margin without the level of risk from the finance side of things that perhaps today they're being too greatly exposed to. So I think from my perspective, as I say, conscious of time here, if there are any further questions, we will be circulating the deck. We will be sending out the recording and all the various links that go with that. But please feel free to reach out if there are specific points that we didn't touch on, or when you receive the copy of the full survey. If there are items that you want further explanation on, then please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'll be very happy to address those for you. I'd just like to thank you, and I hope you will have a good weekend.
All right, and thank you to Owen and Rod. Appreciate it very much. Rod, were you, did you have some final thoughts?
I hope everyone has a fabulous Easter weekend.
Indeed. And one more time, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. Do please take a few moments to fill out your post-survey event. We do take your input very seriously and use it to better our future events. But that does conclude today's conference, and you may now disconnect.